we worry about itself, each day has enough trouble of its own. This is the word of the Lord. Praise be to God. Amen. This passage, Matthew 6:25-34, it is a well-known passage and it is part of the Sermon on the Mount. What is interesting about the Sermon on the Mount is that Jesus starts with the first part of his sermon. He starts with the category of those who are blessed. But the category that Jesus kind of designed or tells us is an interesting category because it doesn't fit our perspective of blessing. Blessed are those who are poor in spirit. Blessed are those who are persecuted. In fact, he says, enjoy, be joyful when that happens. It doesn't fit my category. I don't know about yours, but it doesn't fit mine. And then he moves from blessed are those in different categories that he uses, things that are not exactly the good match for our lives. He moves from there into the category you have heard about the law. There are different things about the law. And he tells the law that is already hard in itself. And then he goes above and beyond the law. Not only that, he says, I didn't come to abolish, but to fulfill the law. If the law is harsh, can you imagine, what Jesus tells us? To go above and beyond. Then he moves from the law and he comes into this new category in his sermon. The category, or advice, I should say, about life and about our relationship with God. So it is exactly this particular part of this sermon that Matthew 6:25-34 is placed. It seems to be intentionally placed right after Jesus talks about the treasures in heaven. It seems to be intentionally placed right after Jesus saying, your hearts must not be on things of this world, but on things that are to come. He seems to be saying that if any investment that we're going to make, we got to make in the things that are to come, because things here on earth will fade away. Everything's going to be gone. So it is in this category that Jesus, in fact, beginning in verse 19, addresses some of the main human concerns, or anxieties, I should say. Things that you shouldn't be anxious about it, but we are. But not only he addresses those problems, Jesus is a good doctor, isn't he? How many of you agree with that? So, amen. So not only he addresses the problem, but also he prescribed a medicine for us. So it is about this Jesus medicine that I want to share something with you. And you've got to take this medicine, by the way, in 2 doses. The first one is a good medicine against anxiety is to glorify God. Average person's anxiety is focused on 40% things that will never happen. 30% things about the past that cannot be changed. 12% things about criticism by others, mostly untrue. 10% about health, which, by the way, gets worse because of the stress. And only 8% about real problems that will be faced. Anxiety. We, human beings, anxiety seems to be part of our human nature. Like I mentioned, some of us seem to be more anxious than others. Some of us seem to be anxious only when crises happen. Others about little things in life. Things that don't seem to be important. But we are concerned. And it starts from childhood. Those of you who are parents. Moreover, those of you who have driven, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 hours with the kids. Can somebody relate to that? Can you say amen? What is the phrase that you hear from the time you leave your home until the time you get there? I no wonder they made a movie called Are We There Yet? It seems that it starts right there. The level of anxiety in our lives. It takes control of our mind, and we think of things, like I mentioned about this statistic, on things that we cannot change in the past. It's over. And things in the future that, guess what? We don't have control over. And yet we are anxious. Jesus says from verse 25 to 34, do not be anxious. And the word he uses here is the word in Greek that is merinate, which means not to be, in the negative, it would be not to be anxious, not to worry about, not to care for, not to be concerned about. This word seems to be so important that he uses this word 6 times. And not only that, Jesus tells us, do not be. He's not asking, let's say, Phil, can you please don't be anxious? That's not how he's saying it. But he says, do not be anxious. And then at this point you go, oh great, so now what do I do? Well, then he prescribed a good medicine. He says, look at the birds of the air and look at the lilies of the field. And say, oh my goodness, oh thanks a lot. That's a good help. Well, if I am to look at the birds of the air and the lilies of the field, let's say, if I lost my job, I don't send a resume, because after all, the lilies of the field and the birds of the air, they don't send a resume, do they? Well, I'm not going to set my alarm clock in the morning to wake up and go to work, because they don't have an alarm clock. Matter of fact, let me put someone in the spot. Brother Tim, what time do you wake up in the morning?
6:07.
6:07. Second question, do you have an alarm clock?
Yes.
Okay, let's pretend that tomorrow you're going to go to work. But you said, I heard that the lilies of the field and the birds of the air, they don't have an alarm clock. So who cares? And you just, maybe that's what Jesus is telling me here. And just throw it away, your alarm clock. By the way, if you're going to do that, let me know, because I need one. So you show up into your job tomorrow after you woke up, whatever time. What's going to happen?
Eventually I won't be there anymore.
Yeah, you're fired. So the point is, even if Tim comes to his boss and said, I heard that Jesus said, look at the lilies of the field and the birds of the air, and they don't, they're there and God takes care of them. That's what I'm doing. I don't need an alarm clock, because God is going to take care of me. If you read this passage really quickly, perhaps you're tempted to think, what in the world Jesus is talking about? Not to be anxious, and to look at the birds, and to look at the lily of the field.